Hi guys, welcome back to Banter with Babs, where we talk about all things LSAT and law school. This past winter, I was accepted to Harvard Law School, and I wanted to share with you guys some of the major takeaways on what makes a great law school application. Today's video will be broken up into two segments. In the first segment, I'm going to talk about what you should be doing in undergrad to prepare yourself to be a top candidate for a top law school. In the second segment, I'm going to be talking about what you should be doing to assemble your actual law school application materials, and along the way, I'll be sharing with you guys my stats to give you guys a general idea of what a typical Harvard Law School applicant might look like. There's a lot of ground to cover today, so let's get started. Let's get the biggest myth out of the way first when it comes to undergrad preparation for law school. A lot of people think that you need to go to an Ivy League undergrad to go to an Ivy League law school, but that is just not the case. Harvard Law School itself represents over 180 undergrad institutions, so don't sell yourself short just because you didn't go to an Ivy League undergrad. Instead, pick an undergraduate institution that best aligns with your passions, your desired culture, and your financial situation. Personally, I went to Texas A&M University, one of the largest public universities in Texas, if not the United States. It was the right fit for me because it gave me the most scholarship opportunity, the most research opportunity, and it made the most financial sense. Ultimately, what matters is not the prestige of your school, but what you do to shine and excel during your time there. Speaking of excelling, let's move on to the topic of majors. It doesn't actually matter what you major in an undergrad because law school doesn't have any prereqs, so don't feel pressured to enter a pre-law program if you don't feel like that's a good fit for you. Instead, pick a major that you have sufficient interest and passion for so that you can maintain those high grades all 4 years of your undergrad. For example, in undergrad, I was a STEM major. More specifically, I graduated with the Bachelor's of Science in Biomedical Science as an honors fellow with a GPA of 3.66. Looking back, I would have liked my GPA to be just a little bit higher for the purposes of law school, but ultimately I have no regrets because I really enjoyed what I was learning and ultimately it made me a better learner. Up until this point, we've talked about the landscape of where your success should take place, but let's dive deeper into what success in college looks like beyond just good grades. A major commonality I found among Harvard Law School students is that in undergrad, they pursued meaningful, independent work. And I'm not just talking about fluffing your resume with officer positions and low commitment clubs. I'm talking about taking ownership of a body of critical academic work. This usually looks like undergraduate research or publishing a thesis or taking on a major independent project or publishing articles. For example, in undergrad, I worked for 3 years as an undergraduate researcher. The culmination of all my work was ultimately published as a thesis. Another example is that during the junior year of college, I worked for a public policy nonprofit in DC and was able to pursue professional work as well as publish an article through their magazine. These are both examples of public pieces of work that I was proud of and able to include in my application to Harvard Law School. Top law schools are interested in students that take initiative in their learning because it demonstrates their independence and their tenacity. I encourage you to start brainstorming early on what sort of projects that you can take on early on in your undergrad to demonstrate your critical thinking, your ambition, and your passion. Okay, so after putting in several years of hard work in undergrad, graduation will start lurking around the corner. There's typically a lot of pressure your junior year of college to start applying to law schools so that you can start law school immediately after graduation. But that pressure is typically unfounded. There is nothing wrong with getting some real-world experience before committing to law school. And in fact, law schools appreciate candidates that can bring professional working experience to the table. 61% of the incoming class of 2022 at Harvard Law School were out of school for more than 2 years. And this doesn't just apply to Harvard Law School. A lot of top law schools appreciate that experience. Personally, I was a high school science teacher for 2 full years before coming to Harvard Law School, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. Not only did it give me the opportunity to give back to my community doing something I loved, it also clarified my ultimate vision and purpose for going to law school in the first place. There is a whole world out there. It can only benefit you to check it out before committing to professional school. Now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty details of the law school application. A typical law school application will require the submission of an LSAT score, a transcript, a resume, letters of recommendation, and a personal statement. The motto for this segment of the video is going to be the early bird gets the worm. A lot of the success and potency of an application rides on how early you submit it. So let's start off with talking about the LSAT. Your LSAT score, in conjunction with your GPA, will largely determine the range of law law schools that you'll be able to get into, so it's important to take the process seriously. I've made multiple videos in the past on how to take the LSAT effectively that I will link down below in the description box, but in terms of timing, you want to make sure you take your LSAT no later than July so that you can give yourself plenty of time in the summer to arrange your materials before fall arrives. When considering the amount of time that you should set aside for studying for the LSAT, give yourself at least 6 months. Most of my classmates who are also top scorers devoted at least 6 months, and myself, I devoted 1 year to get from a 161 to a 175. So gauge where you are, don't rush it. The LSAT is one of the most important components of your law school application. After taking my July LSAT, I was able to focus first on updating and formatting my resume. The Harvard Law School website has actually some great examples of what an excellent law school application resume looks like. I recommend checking that out in the description box below, but ultimately you want to employ good action verbs and a clean design, no more than 2 pages in your resume. As a reference, I was a part of a lot of scholarship programs and research programs in undergrad, and I also worked for 2 years after, and I took up no more than 2 pages as well on my resume. When your resume is spick and span, it is time to start brainstorming for your personal statement, which in my humble opinion is the most difficult part of the law school application after the LSAT. The personal statement is your opportunity to shine. It's your opportunity to tell your personal story and really give yourself some dimension to the law school admission staff. Because this is such a big endeavor, you want to give yourself several weeks to write it. It can really help to read examples of personal statements to get a feel for the caliber of writing and the different approaches people typically take when it comes to their essays. There are plenty of websites with examples of personal statement essays that I'll link down below. Personally, I went a little bit overboard and I read both the first and second edition of the 55 successful Harvard Law School application essays before writing my own personal statement. In terms of topic, I chose to write my personal statement about my experiences teaching and how it clarified my vision and purpose for going to law school. It took me about 1 full month to write from beginning to end. Since we're on the topic of essays, I do want to note that law schools typically have optional essays that you can write as well, such as diversity statements or interest statements. I highly recommend writing these to flesh out your application and really put yourself out there for the admission staff. Personally, I wrote a diversity statement for Harvard Law School detailing my experiences as a first-generation immigrant in the United States. Once you have finally completed your essays, it is time to request letters of recommendation. You generally want to ask 2 to 4 recommenders depending on the requirements of your law school. For Harvard, they take 3 letters of recommendation. The reason I say that you should start asking after your application materials are ready is that your professors will typically want to read your essays and your resume and your transcript to get a better feel of who you are as an overall candidate and write the best possible recommendation letter for you. You typically want to ask your recommenders 1 month in advance before you plan to submit your entire application. And you want to ask people who know you really well, professors, mentors, employers, who can recall specific experiences and specific traits in you that help you shine as an applicant. For Harvard Law School specifically, I had 3 recommenders. My first recommender was a professor I worked in undergraduate research with. My second recommender was a professor I completed an honors course with and an honors project with. And my third recommender was a mentor I had in a scholarship program through my university. Once all your application materials are ready and compiled and you are good to submit, one thing to consider is that applications can get pretty expensive. The typical cost of a law school application is about $70, so you definitely want to keep that in mind because that cost can build up depending on how many law schools that you apply to. You can apply for waivers ahead of time, so consider that an option as well. If all goes well, you just might be invited for an interview at the law school you applied to. At Harvard Law School specifically, they interview all of the applicants they're interested in, and you need to get that stamp of approval in order to become a law school admit. But don't panic. Getting invited for an interview is a good sign. It means the law school is interested in you and they want to get to know a little bit more about you. The Harvard Law School website actually has a list of questions, of potential interview questions they might ask you, so you can prepare ahead of time, which I highly recommend. In addition to reviewing those questions, make sure that you read all of the essays you've submitted to your law school and your transcript and your resume so that if you're asked any specific questions about timelines or specificities, you are ready to go and you are not surprised. As a wrap up for today's video, I'm going to walk you guys through step by step my Harvard Law School application timeline. So September 29th is when I officially submitted my application. The Harvard Law School application opens right around September, so I was ready as soon as it opened. And November 15th is when I was invited for an interview. And November 20th is when I actually interviewed. To be honest, it was a little scary in the beginning. You know, when you first get into your interview, you're a little bit shaky, but overall I felt like it went really well and I had a good time. December 16th is when I got my phone call. I remember very clearly, actually. It was around 12:30 p.m. in the afternoon. My kids had just started their study hall. When I picked up the phone in the hallway, my interviewer was one that called me and they invited me a seat in the incoming class of 2023. Because I was at work, I had to like keep it together, you know, contain all like of the crazy excitement inside, but it truly was one of the happiest days of my life. It was actually early enough, December 16th, for me to order Harvard mom and dad t-shirts for my parents to surprise them on Christmas Day, December 25th. Applying to law school is a big decision and an even bigger journey. I know everything can seem really overwhelming in the beginning, but if you just take it one step at a time, you'll be starting your first day of law school before you know it. And in fact, tomorrow, I'm gonna be starting my first day of orientation at Harvard Law School, so fingers crossed it goes really well. If you guys have any questions about the law school application process, and especially for the Harvard Law School application process, please comment down below. I'm always happy to help. If you found today's video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for all things LSAT and law school. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!